Good morning, everyone. So, first article for the day. Will step in if mass exclusion is found in draft voter rolls. Supreme Court. In continuation to yesterday, whatever we discussed, Supreme Court yesterday said that we will accommodate free and fair elections as fairness and freedom, that is, liberties. Both these aspects will be upheld. This is what the Supreme Court promised yesterday. So, this is the first article for the day. This article is about child trafficking. The article is about how Bihar, which is a very poor state, becomes a hub for human trafficking. Lot of girls are exploited because of their vulnerability, and because of this vulnerability itself you will see how they are exploited. This exploitation will lead to anti-social forces using their vulnerability to push them into trafficking. For example, you will see until June this year, the Bihar police rescued 271 girls in the state. 153 of them trafficked into orchestras and the remaining 118 forced into flesh trade. So, the common practice here is that you will see this kind of recording dances where vulgar display of dances happen, and the remaining of them are pushed into prostitution. You have to link this to existing social condition, patriarchy, and the normal situations where the norms are against the aspirations of women. And we have anti-trafficking, human trafficking units. These anti-human trafficking units are usually understaffed. What are the 3 F's of governance? Funds, functions, and functionaries. Funds, functions, functionaries. You don't give them enough power, you don't give them enough skill. Number of people itself are not there, and of course they're underfunded. What will happen? Apart from this, I told you there needs to be a central idea that is driving governance. The very idea to protect women is just absent. There is a lot of insensitivity. Because of this insensitivity towards the cause of women, you will notice that there is systemic apathy. These are the key words that you have to use. Systemic apathy. When there is systemic apathy, what happens? It leads to complete neglect of the issue. Right? What we need to correct is this systemic apathy. So we need to address the idea behind it. And then also fix the governance aspect. If this is fixed, this will automatically be fixed, because there is a compulsive force from the society itself that we need to correct this issue. Here you would see that this specific case study, the Center for Legal Action and Behavior, CLAB, recently released a report building the case for zero, how prosecution acts as the tipping point to end child labor, the case from India. So the data is from 24 states. It showed that prosecution is the key to securing justice. Along with law enforcement, the NGO network rescued 53,651 children from trafficking, pursuing legal action. Nearly 90% of these children were formed in worse forms of child labor. This data point is extremely important. When you look at the International Labour Organization, you have certain conventions, and you also have UNCRC, United Nations Convention on Rights of Child. and also the ILO conventions. These will showcase the importance of why it is important to protect the child labor against this worst form of labor. When you are putting children in such hazardous activity, especially in the age where their mental abilities are developing, it becomes an irreversible change. Okay, and that is why it is important to end this. And for this, we need a systemic approach rather than just putting the blame on a single institution. What are the reasons for such attitudes? One is the economic gain. Two is the social attitude. If you address both these aspects through strict law enforcement, that is when there will be a systemic change. As of now, conviction rates are so poor that nothing is changing. It is not impossible to fix this. It is the lack of political will and social pressure that is perpetuating this kind of situations. Simple example. There are many porous borders in Nepal, Bihar-Nepal border, through which trafficking happens to normal public transport. Is it so difficult to stop that? No. But there is no will from the government or the local authorities. And there is no systemic resistance from the very population because of their vulnerability. Civil society bodies sometimes masquerade as, which are posing themselves as the units which will protect children and girl child especially. They themselves are included in this flesh trade sometimes. So it requires action from every stakeholder to fix this issue. Otherwise, the dark reality of human trafficking perpetuates, not because of lack of governance, but because of a systemic apathy to fix that issue. Governance is easy to blame, but where is the will? That's the point of this article. Moving on. Formalization to power productivity growth. What is the role of labor in productivity? What do you mean by productivity in the first place in an economy? Productivity means efficiency. Let's say you put in X number of hours as an aspirant. Are you getting output worth X hours? Or a percentage of X hours? Maybe a percentage. That percentage defines the productivity. It is the efficiency with which an economy will function. One of the factor for production is labor. Labor is divided into formal, informal. Formal means you have social security and official protection through laws. All the employees in organizations have this social security. But when you're talking about the informal sector, let's say for example, this includes your gig economy, your contract labor, your agriculture labor, or basically everyone who is working like a daily wage. The problem with this sector is that they don't have any kind of social security, and usually when large firms, especially in the manufacturing sector, they're recruiting people with this ideology, obviously they know that they won't stay for long. So skill investment or investments into skilling their workforce, this is virtually absent. What is the implication of this? What will this lead to? Data says that nearly the unfavorable productivity gap, 42%, according to the data, these companies have 42% less productivity than many other skilled companies or companies with skilled professionals. And the reason why companies are not investing is because it is easy to get away with contract labor, and government regulations are very strict with respect to formal employees. You have to pay them provident fund, etc. You have to make contributions, and if the companies are not willing to go for that, they're not willing to invest, they will always remain small. Only when you invest and skill, this MSME will grow into a medium, small, medium, small, and micro. Actually, it should be the other way around: micro, small, and medium. But with the present setup, it is becoming medium, small, and micro. They're preferring to stay small because of government regulations, compliance burden. When will this medium term one become big one? Large firm. When will they become? Mega corporations, MNCs. When will they become bigger companies? Only when you have the government support. And in the absence of that, we will continue to stay like this. In 2020, we have had the new labor codes. These labor codes were not implemented. Labor codes refer to updated laws with respect to labor, which protects both the employer as well as the employee. But they are not implemented even after 5 years, which makes it difficult for all the states to enforce these labor codes. So the article says that we have to move towards formalization, because only if we are able to move towards formalization, it will become mandatory for companies to contribute to the employees, which will make them retain employees and invest in skills. That is how we will realize the dream of making India one of the largest economies in the 100th year of independence in 2047. Okay? That is the second article. Why the Gini index is wrong about India? See, this is in continuation with respect to what we have already studied. Gini coefficient is a measure of inequality. There is a news item which says that India is now one of the top 5 countries where we are most equal. There is a problem here, according to this article writer. When we are talking about inequality, are we talking about income or are we talking about consumption? Okay. If we are talking about income, is it pre-tax or post-tax? So, the Gini index ranked India among the world's most equal societies by giving the country a score which is moderately low. While this may be a cause of celebration, the lived reality in India paints a different picture. Okay, so forms of inequalities. If you see here, you will notice a lot of comparisons which are good for your essay. So I want you to read this in the context of GS3, inclusive growth. Okay, and use these comparisons. How a chauffeur and or a driver as well as the owner, how will they behave? How will inequality capture the entire Gini coefficient? How will it capture the picture of Indian economy? The top 1%, they underreport because they fear harassment from officials. The bottom, they underconsume. They don't know what is required for them for a healthy diet, lack of awareness, for example. So they underconsume, they underreport. and we are only focusing on the formal sector. We are not sure if income can be captured completely. Even if you're talking about consumption and saying we are one of the most equal societies, there is a problem with the data collection which does not show the entire picture. We are only focusing on the formal sector. What about the informal sector, which constitutes 90% of the society? So, saying that India is more or less equal is not actually a representation of how India is, and therefore we need to relook at the methodology. This is what this article is trying to say. This is about the advisory jurisdiction. Income. Top 1% of the richest people. Okay. This is about the advisory jurisdiction of International Court of Justice. So here you need to know the difference between International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court. Two different bodies, two different statutes through which they were established, which is important for prelims. Now, this is very important, advisory role of ICJ. When UN asks an advice on how to approach an issue with respect to international law, ICJ gives an opinion which may or may not be binding depending on how the countries treat it. Okay, just like how the president is empowered to ask or seek an advice from Supreme Court, even UN can seek an opinion on international issues from ICJ. It is on this front UN asked an advice on how to go about climate change. This entire article is about how ICJ gave an advice. Here you will have to focus on some important terminologies which are important for ethics. For example, common but differentiated responsibility. What does this mean? 2. Climate justice or equity. There is another term called carbon space for development. What do you mean by each of these terms? Let us understand. See, if you take a look at history from 1750, the colonial powers in the northern hemisphere, they extracted maximum natural resources and contributed to the climate problem. Now, when the southern world or the developing countries are catching up, like India for example, we need some carbon space because the current economic models are still based on fossil fuels. We will still emit greenhouse gas emissions. And you can't say the climate goal is, catching up. We have to reduce emissions. So the burden is disproportionately pushed on the countries that are emitting a lot of greenhouse gases now. There are two approaches through which we wanted to handle this climate change problem. One is do whatever you can. This is what we tried in COP21 through Paris Climate Deal. And as of now, 10 years later, data shows that it's just not working out. The one before that, in 1997, in COP5, we have had the Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol was based on this common but differentiated responsibility. Everybody is responsible, but the amount of burden that the developed world should take is higher because they historically contributed to this problem. Common but differentiated responsibility. And this is what is considered to be climate justice. because it is fair that we are expecting this. Climate justice or climate equity. Okay. And the word carbon space for development indicates that if you are asking a country like India, for example, to move towards green fuels or energy transition, we need to have some space, we need to have some room, which is denied. If you're denying that, it's not justice. So, International Court of Justice said that we have to move towards this common but differentiated responsibility, and we have to try and arrive at an institutional mechanism that will enforce, not voluntary contributions, because the climate goal needs to be fixed. According to the assessment report 6 of IPCC, our target is by 2100 we have to reduce the climate change by 1.5 degrees Celsius. ICJ believes that we should fix to this. Don't make it, a shaky ground. It's not enough. It's just not enough. Whatever we are doing is just not enough. That is the problem. Okay, we also have hydrogen fuels, we have solar, and this should be done at scale across the world. Only then we will be able to catch up to this climate goals. And that is the gist of this article. So that's it for today. Not a lot of important articles, but one second, we'll see one more thing. Yeah, this one. Sorry, this one more article is there. Manipur is also gearing up for special intensive revision. In this context, I wanted to brief about National Population Register, National Register of Citizens, and Special Intensive Revision. See, if you take a look at all of them, what is the common point here? Proof. Documents are asked. What will this lead to? When you ask documents, do I have to explain the special intensive revision? We are doing this from many days, so not needed. When it comes to the National Population Registry, it's like a superset through which you will filter out NRC. This is based on country of origin, like where are they from, proof of ancestry. This is based on residence. Okay, please understand that. If you create a database of all the people staying in a particular region based on your house address proof, that becomes NPR. To this you add one more filter of ancestry, that becomes NRC. This is done through which law? Citizenship Amendment Act. NRC is legitimized through Citizenship Amendment Act, but whereas you're talking about special intensive revision, it is through which act? RPA, Representation of People Act. Okay, in both the laws you are asking for proof of documents. You are virtually saying that if you don't produce these documents, you are disenfranchised from voting. What does that mean? You are no longer considered to be a citizen. In the same situation here also, you are no longer considered to be a citizen. Here you won't get any government benefits. Here you will be sent out of the country. Clear? The laws and the methods might be different, but the intent is pointing towards the same thing. Therefore, we need to systematize the process. I'll tell you what is going to happen. For example, in Manipur, there is a lot of conflict. Métis, Cookies, etc. They're having constant power struggle. Now, there are some concentration camps based on those concentration camps, not exactly concentration camps, they're by their opposition parties call them concentration camps, just like how it was there back in Nazi time in the World War era. The conditions in these places are pretty bad. They are rehabilitation spots. They're supposed to be spots for internally displaced people. And if you are using those temporary address as the proof for giving voter cards, it will change the demography of that region, which is what the opposition party there, Congress, is opposing. And the government promised that they will conduct NRC in this region. And a prerequisite for that would be proof of residence. And we don't have that. In case of voting, you're giving it through SIR. Why not maintain the same consistency in Bihar? That's a question, which questions the very intent with which the government is functioning. Why not have a uniformity in policy if uniformity is not maintained, and if there are any specific conditions that are pertinent to that state only, there must be some logic, right? So what is the logic in allowing internally displaced people a temporary address for voting? But why not use the same logic for migrant population? So questions like this remain. So this is an evolving area. The difference between SIR, NRC, NPR. NRC, NPR happen through Home Ministry through Census Act. Also, enumeration will happen, census enumeration will happen through Census Act. When you link this Census Act to this Act, Citizenship Amendment Act, what will happen? So many laws, so many loopholes are there. What is the role of Census Act in this? If you are giving someone an authority, the same booth level officers are used for NRC, NPR, SIR, census. Why have so much duplication of effort? Yeah, there is a conflict happening in that region. The background story we will probably cover in some other day. There is a lot of conflict in Manipur. Okay? So this kind of question. Can you repeat the question? It is not about efficiency, it is about conflict there. There is not a lot of internal conflict in southern states. When you take a look at the northeastern states, there are so many tribes, there are so many communities which are at war with each other, which makes law and order a very big problem in those regions. And that's why Schedule 5, Schedule 6 areas, as they are called, they have a different architecture with respect to polity. And that's why there is no stability in those regions, and that's why this whole issue is coming up. Okay? So, yeah, that's it for the day. We will catch up again tomorrow.